Today, I'll introduce you to design arguments for God's existence. In this first lecture, we will introduce design arguments and we will go over Hume's design argument. In the next lecture, we'll look at the fine-tuning argument. So let's talk about design arguments. What are they? What's their main point? So the main question for design argument is why does the universe and many of the things it contains appear to be designed? So, for example, the mathematical nature of the universe, the physical constants, and we'll look at some of the physical constants in the fine-tuning argument, the human body, the cell, DNA in the cell. For each of those things, it looks like it's designed. It gives the appearance of design. And then the design arguments, they sort of conclude that there was a designer, a god, if you will, who created and designed the universe. These sorts of arguments are a posteriori, meaning they begin with a contingent fact about the universe that you can only know through experience, that it exhibits order and apparent design. So some noteworthy proponents are St. Thomas, William Paley, and Alvin Plantinga. Opponents are David Hume, Bertrand Russell, and John Mackey. So let's talk about Hume's design argument from analogy. David Hume is a philosopher from the 1700s, and he wrote a book called Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. And if you're in my class, we're doing our reading from there. And in this book, he criticizes arguments for God's existence, and the way he does it is through the course of a dialogue. There are three characters, Cleanthes, Demia, and Philo. Philo represents Hume and is sort of an atheist, although that's not clear because at the end of the book, he seems to assent to some version of the cosmological argument. And then Demia is a believer in God, but is sort of a mystic, so he doesn't think God is a mystery. You can't really know God through rational inquiry. And then Cleanthes is what I'll call a rational believer in God, meaning he thinks you can use reasons and evidence to get at the truth of the claim that God exists. And this is a standard text in philosophy of religion. I recommend it to anyone. Here's a relevant portion of Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion where Cleanthes gives the design argument. Look round the world. Contemplate the whole and every part of it. You will find it to be nothing but one great machine, subdivided into an infinite number of lesser machines, which again admit of subdivisions to a degree beyond what human senses and faculties can trace and explain. All these various machines, and even their most minute parts, are adjusted to each other with an accuracy which ravishes into admiration all men who have ever contemplated them. The curious adapting of means to ends throughout all nature resembles exactly, though it much exceeds, the productions of human contrivance, of human designs, thought, wisdom, and intelligence. Since, therefore, the effects resemble each other, we are led to infer by all the rules of analogy that the causes also resemble, and that the author of nature is somewhat similar to the mind of man, though possessed of much larger faculties, proportioned to the grandeur of the work which he has executed. By this argument a posteriori, and by this argument alone, do we prove at once the existence of a deity and his similarity to human mind and intelligence. So maybe you should pause here and sort of try to analyze this paragraph to see if you can spot the argument. But it does rely on, the universe being a machine or like a machine, and it's an analogical argument. So here, from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, is Hume's design argument, given by Cleanthes. Number one, the material universe resembles the intelligent productions of human beings, in that it exhibits apparent design. Two, the design in any human artifact is the effect of having been made by an intelligent being. Three, like effects have like causes. Therefore, the design in the material universe is the effect of having been made by an intelligent creator. So the basic argument is the universe is like a machine. For any machine that we know of, it's caused by an intelligent being. Therefore, the universe, in being like a machine, is caused by an intelligent being. It's an argument by analogy, and such arguments are find characteristics that two or more things have in common, and concludes that the things being compared probably have some other characteristic in common. For example, John and I like the same bands, sports teams, movies, and clothes. John likes science fiction stories, therefore I will probably like science fiction stories. Now this one admittedly isn't very good. You can't really have much confidence in the conclusion based on the premises. I don't think so, but it is analogical. We're comparing John and I and showing things that we have in common, and then concluding we have this other thing in common. And here's the form of analogical arguments. X and Y have characteristics A, B, C in common. X has characteristic K, therefore Y has characteristic K. X and Y would be John and I. Characteristics A, B, C would be movies, bands, television. I can't really remember. X has characteristic K, so John likes science fiction movies. Therefore, Y like science fiction movies, which is characteristic K. And with the design argument, it would be the universe and machines have certain characteristics in common. Maybe you could point out order, complexity, and function. Machines, at least made by humans, were made by an intelligence. Therefore, the universe was made by an intelligence. So what do you think of Hume's argument? Is it good? Is it bad? Can you think of any objections to it? Put those in the comments if you like. So let's consider one objection. So Philo, if you recall, is the character in the dialogue in Hume's dialogues concerning natural religion who is sort of irreligious. He tries to attack arguments for God's existence. And what he says is something like this: the analogy between the universe and machines is weak. There are too many dissimilarities between the universe and machines, so the analogy can't support an inference to a designer. So he's saying, hey, Cleanthes, you say the universe is like a machine, but in what way? They're so dissimilar, the argument can't be supported by the analogy. And here's a quote from him. If we see a house, a man-made sort of object, we conclude that it had an architect or a builder. But surely you will not affirm that the universe bears such a resemblance to a house that we can with the same certainty infer a similar cause, or that the analogy here is entire and perfect. The dissimilitude is so striking that the utmost you can here pretend to is a guess, a conjecture, a presumption concerning a similar cause. So, hey, Cleanthes, if the universe is like machines, let's consider some examples. Consider a house. Consider the universe in comparison to a house. Yes, with a house you can infer that it has a designer, but the inference doesn't follow that we can infer that the universe has a designer. Why? Because a house and the universe, they're so dissimilar that here we're just guessing when we say they have a similar cause. The way I would reply is as follows. Well, okay, the universe isn't very much like a house, but if you're pointing out disanalogies between the universe or things in it, like the eye, like the cell, and then human artifacts or machines, you need to show that these cases that say the universe and a house are different in those respects that are essential to the argument. When it comes to analogical arguments, you can point out differences, but if they're irrelevant to the inference being made, then the differences don't really matter, right? We need to talk about relevant differences that are relevant to the design inference. So what's essential to the argument is that houses, watches, and universes, or things within the universe, show a marvelously complex interrelation of parts, and I would add, for a certain purpose. Okay, so does the house exhibit order, function, and complexity? Yes. Does the universe, or at least things in it like the eye, exhibit order, function, and complexity? Yes. And so that's all that matters for the inference. So that's the the back and forth of Hume's argument by design. Cleanthes supports the argument, whereas Philo objects to it. And then I gave you my own response to Philo. So now we'll move on to the fine-tuning argument.